The audience was the star at Woodstock, and the bands were there because of that.
Remember, the original prognostication was that there'd be somewhere between 30 to 50,000 people for the 3 days, half of whom would spend the 3 days and the other half of whom would go home each night, and the half that would stay would be sleeping in the campground up there. Well, as you know, that did not come to pass.
It was also a chance for our generation to prove that we could be a peaceful generation and live together in peace based upon music and love for each other. So it was an experiment.
It was originally meant as a local concert that would raise money to build a recording studio in upstate New York. It built way more than anyone could imagine. Hi, I'm Mark Goodman. 50 years have passed since a live music festival held from August 15th to 18th, 1969, became a defining cultural milestone. Of course, I'm talking about Woodstock. It was a particular alchemy of inspiration, on-the-fly thinking, an evolving business plan, Mother Nature, and of course the power of music. Those 3 days in 1969 created a moment, one that still echoes today. Half a century on, we have a slightly different perspective on what was then billed as an Aquarian exposition, 3 days of peace and music. So let's step back for a moment to explore how one music festival among several that year came to surpass them all and remains the gold standard for every big cultural event to this day. After meeting, Lang and Kornfeld quickly bonded over their mutual love of music. And they started kicking around ideas for something that would capture what was bubbling under in the culture. Lang had been spending a lot of time in an arts community in the Catskills, where artists like Bob Dylan, Paul Simon, and Richie Havens lived. And he had a passion for attending live shows around the country.
What intrigued me was Monterey. I was completely taken by that event and that film, and I realized that was something I wanted to do.
The Woodstock Festival didn't start out as a festival to begin with. Michael Lang and Artie Kornfeld had this idea to build a recording studio in the town of Woodstock, New York. Woodstock, New York had been a bohemian community, an artist community since the beginning of the 20th century. And a lot of musicians lived there. Bob Dylan, Richie Havens, Van Morrison, they were all up in Woodstock. But there was no recording studio. Let's build a recording studio. And you know, we can raise money to offset the cost of it by inviting all those local musicians, and we can have a party, have a concert. Well, they approached their business partners, Joel Rosenman and John Roberts, and pitched the idea of this recording studio. Well, they'd already built a recording studio in Manhattan. They had no interest at all in doing another recording studio. But they did like this idea of the party. Bring all those musicians together. Let's do a rock festival.
Yeah, well, the first concept was why we said the first night, Music and Art Fair. It was supposed to be the shining light of the War Babies moment. It was supposed to be the moment the War Babies exploded into the world and said, here we are, here's our music and here's our art, and here's how we feel. You know, musically and politically and in other ways, you know, but music came first. The music part came first. We did recognize that if it did happen, it would have a profound effect on what was happening in the rest of the world, because all of a sudden the powers that be would say, hey, wait a minute, here's the vote for the future, and they're showing up in mass, and they're peaceful.
The seeds were taking root for this combination of an art event, music, and people. But how would it be different?
The Woodstock Festival was not the first rock festival. That belongs 2 years earlier in 1967 with the Monterey Pop Festival, the Magic Mountain Fair, and other festivals in the summer of 1967, the Summer of Love. But after those festivals, rock festivals sprouted up all over the country. Most of them, however, were held at racetracks, parks that had band shells, and of course, many of them had trouble with the law. There were gate crashers, trigger-happy policemen who wanted to see that these young people were kept down. Several of the rock festivals that preceded Woodstock ended up in riots. So when Woodstock was announced, and on the lead up to the Woodstock Festival, local law enforcement, in fact law enforcement all over the state of New York and down into New Jersey, were quite worried about what was going to happen in Bethel, New York for that Woodstock Festival.
We had a different vision, a completely different vision. And our vision was to create a very positive, a very sort of comforting environment for the audience, not to present confrontation in any way. To make it something that, you know, if you could imagine the best of what this could be, that's what you're getting. You know, and then you make of it what you will from there. And so I went to Denver and I saw, you know, the 250 cops with riot gear sitting in the bleachers right across from people, waiting for somebody to try and break the gate down. So into our plan went free stage, free kitchens. You know, people are going to come without money. You don't want, you know, give them a place to go, give them the music, give them the experience. Why not? So that's kind of how I developed a lot of the strategies for Woodstock.
But now they needed a site. This quiet area of upstate New York was not enthusiastic about having a bunch of rock stars and several thousand young people descend on their community. Although the Woodstock team initially struck a deal for a location at Wallkill, it fell through just weeks before the event was to kick off. The pressure was on, but for Lang, there had always been one essential.
It was always about going back to nature. It was always about organic, you know, because I thought if anything could allow people to feel at ease, that would be it.
Enter Max Yasgur, one of the area's most prominent citizens, and his 600-acre dairy farm. His son, Sam, looks back.
It started as a straight business deal. The summer of '69 was a very wet summer. We couldn't get hay in the barn. This was a hayfield. When you have that many cattle and you've got to put up enough hay to get them through the winter and you can't make it yourself, the prospect of having to buy that amount of hay was daunting, to say the least. Johnny Roberts and Mike Lang came on I think it was a Sunday afternoon, and said they'd like to rent a field for 3 days, and this field would be appropriate because it has a bowl-shaped topography. Then things changed, and they changed fairly dramatically because some of the neighbors had a very negative reaction to what were then called hippies coming to western Sullivan County, and that bothered Dad. I can remember him saying to one of them, "Look, the reason you don't want them here is because you don't like what they look like." I don't particularly like what they look like either, but that's not the point. They may be protesting the war, but thousands of American soldiers have died so they can do exactly what they're doing. That's what the essence of the country is all about. And from that point on, he became a champion.
Word of the festival was spreading, and this was way before social media. Something was in the air.
When we started this, we permitted for 50,000. And 50,000 was never really the number. The number that we worked on, that all of my projections were made, were 200,000. And that's what we thought we'd max out. And so when we figured toilets, when we figured whatever we figured something that had to work for a crowd of 200,000 people. And the permit process went on, I think, until 3 or 4 days before the event. But we knew people were coming from everywhere, because I get calls from California, I get calls from all over the country. You know, and most of that was just from rumor, from word of mouth. So we knew that it was going to be immense. We didn't know it was going to be as immense, but we knew it was going to be immense.
But there was still something missing, namely the artists. Now, with their connections in the music business and a growing number of advance tickets already sold, Lang and Kornfeld were able to convince some acts to sign on. Some.
In order to get some credibility, we overpaid the first couple of acts. I think we paid $10,000 for the Starship, the airplane then, yeah. And first 2 or 3 acts that we nailed down gave us the credibility for it to start to roll.
As long as the advertising kept running and the site kept being built, okay, then I could hold people on a string believing this was going to happen. And then once Jimi Hendrix said yes, then the gates opened. When Jimmy said yes, I'll play. And he's the only artist that got like big money for then. You know, everybody else would play for nothing at Woodstock. It didn't matter.
In upstate New York, the summer of '69 was one of the wettest on record. After losing their original site in Wallkill, the festival pulled up stakes, literally, and set to work reconstructing the stage and facilities on the Yasgur farm. But time and the elements were not cooperating. And
so over the weekend that we found the site, made the deal with Max, and got the trucks rolling the next day. We were only 23 days out or 24 days out from the festival. And we started moving the crews up, dismantling and reassembling stuff in Bethel. I think of the 23 days that we worked up there, the 24 days, whatever it was, it rained probably 20 days. It was unbelievable, the amount of water in the ground, and it's all clay. I remember one piece of road across the top of the hill. I think I put the road in 8 times, and it sank. And we put the road in, and it would sink. And we put the road in, and it would rain, and it would sink. And every time I'd have to do something like that, because we discovered, okay, we can't bury pipe, for example. We couldn't bury the water system. We'd have to run across another piece of Max's land. I'd call up and I'd say, Max, I need to talk to you about something. And I'd always get his wife on the phone, and she'd say, okay, come over in half an hour. And Max he had a heart condition. He'd immediately go into the oxygen tent to get ready for my visit.
As ticket sales increased, it was clear that security would be crucial to manage the crowds on the way to Bethel, New York. But cops in riot gear could easily escalate a situation.
The concept, I think, in all our minds from the beginning was to make it just a very safe but very embracing environment. You needed cops. We had a security force that was going to be made up of off-duty New York City cops. So we hired a guy named Wes Pomeroy to do our head of security. He was the head of the Crime Commission in Washington under Nixon. He handled the '68 Democratic Convention in Chicago. He had great experience in dealing with crowds and the right attitude. You know, you don't want someone who's going to be a macho guy just, creating those irritations. And Wes understood it all. And somewhere there is a questionnaire form that he used to interview the off-duty cops with, which is just riotous, but was designed to find out what do you do when somebody blows pot smoke in your face.
The Hog Farm was originally tasked with setting up services like a kitchen, medical tents, and trip tents to help anybody under the influence. But after the police were pulled, the farm had one more thing added to their list. Hugh Romney, better known as Wavy Gravy, and Lisa Law were commune members.
The Hog Farm commune were a bunch of misfits, all living together, helping each other out. And the Hog Farm is known for their caring for people that are loaded. And that's why actually they were hired. They were hired in order to help take care of any drug problems that were going to arise, which did, because almost everybody at Woodstock was loaded.
We spilled off that aircraft and there was the world press standing around, Klieg lights blazing, cameras at the hip and ready, and this reporter looks at me and says, "Oh, the Hog Farm, huh? You guys are the security." I said, "My God, they made us the cops." I said, "Well, do you feel secure?" The guy said, well, sure. I said, "See, it's working."
Feeding people would be another factor. The Hog Farm was setting up kitchens on the site. Lisa Law went to see the investors, Joel Rosenman and John Roberts.
So I went to the office there, and Joel and John were there, and I said, I need another $3,000. And they said, well, what for? And I said, well, so far I've got half of what I need, and I need some more money to get the rest of it, because we're going to be feeding a lot of people. So I bought 1,500 pounds of bulgur wheat and 1,500 pounds of rolled oats too, and currants, things for muesli. We got trash cans to mix our vegetables in, cleavers, Chinese cleavers, onion cutters, and everything to mix the food in. And that's what we ended up mixing the muesli in, was these big trash cans. We had to think big.
The Woodstock planners had originally thought they might get 50,000 people. But a few days out, with things nowhere near being done, people were continuing to arrive, and those numbers well exceeded the promoter's estimate. And that summer, John Conway was a teenager working at a local gas station.
We had these people coming in these Volkswagen vans, and a lot of them didn't have any money. They had come from pretty far away, and they were desperate for gas. They literally were begging you, could we drain the hoses into the Volkswagen so that we can get a little bit further on? And at first I was not aware of what was going on. In fact, I remember people coming in and asking for directions to Woodstock, not knowing anything about this Woodstock concert at this early point in the summer. We were literally directing people to Woodstock in Ulster County, and then at some point in time we realized that there was this music festival that was supposed to be happening. But these people came very early for the festival, and they didn't have tickets. And that's another thing that I think a lot of people forget, is that there were really two groups of people who came to the concert. There were a group that had tickets who arrived late for the most part, and found this amazing group of people already there who had come early because they didn't have tickets and had created this site around the festival. So it was pretty interesting in that regard to see this influx into the county. And it was a different kind of person than we were used to seeing.
So I walk out, and it's like the day before the festival, and nobody's even tried to put up fences, and there's 75,000 people on the field. I said, what are we going to do? Ask them to leave?
But on either Wednesday or Thursday morning, there were already a few thousand kids sitting on this site. And the way it was related to me is that particularly Johnny Roberts became concerned. The thing that he did not want was a crush against the fence and anybody getting hurt. So he ordered the fence taken down, and Woodstock then became a freebie. And when Woodstock became a freebie, one of the most popular DJs of the day, who happened to have a house up here in the county, a fellow by the name of Bruce Morrow, Cousin Brucey, announced on the radio that Woodstock was a freebie, and New York City emptied out.
I mean, I was a little nervous. The Angels came rolling in the morning, Friday morning, and the sky didn't look, too friendly. But as soon as the music finally started, as soon as we got the music going, you could feel where the people were coming from and what the crowd was feeling. You could actually feel it. It was palpable. I knew we were okay.
By the first official day of the festival, about 400,000 people gathered in Max Yasgur's field. More were coming. There were rumors that some of the biggest groups might appear. They didn't show. John Lennon, stuck in Canada. Dylan didn't like crowds. Jim Morrison hated playing outdoor festivals. And Mick Jagger was filming the movie Ned Kelly. But in the meantime, 32 other acts were making their way to Woodstock, or at least trying to. Weather, time, and other issues had slowed preparations, and the delays would affect performances throughout the entire weekend. Around 5 o'clock, an anxious Woodstock team enlisted Richie Havens to start the show.
So here we are at the two hotels they told us to come to, 7 miles away from the ground. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at television, and I'm sitting there, I'm looking at television and saying hi to somebody. It's now 3:30 in the afternoon, and going, uh-oh, something's wrong, because no one's come to say anything. you know, what is happening? And the next thing I know, I hear this really loud noise. Turns out that they found a farmer down the road with a helicopter. So we crammed into this helicopter, two conga drums in between me and the guy on this side, and the other guy sitting a little below us, you know. And we made it to the back of that stage and got off the helicopter and started to walk around backstage. And the only person I saw was Tim Hardin, the only person. And I went, "Wait, Tim is here. Tim, did you go on?" "No, I'm not going on first." I say, "Wow, I know I'm supposed to be fifth." So that's what I expected. And of course, an hour later, they started chasing me because I was running. Every time they'd say, "Richie, would you go on? Something's got to happen." I say, "Yeah, you want it to happen to me, right?"
During the course of the day Friday, waiting for Richie Havens, you know, and the delay and the delay and the delay or whatever, and then, you know, looking at what was happening around you. And then when he finally started to play and hearing the roar, you know, that came out of the area, you know, at that point you kind of knew that it was something different.
Logistics were making it tough for other performers to make it to the site.
I was supposed to do maybe 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes. And when I walked off the first time, they said, "Richie, you got to do 4 more songs." So I said, okay. I went back and I did 4 more songs, and I walked off again. I said, "Richie, 3 more?" You know, on the 6th time that I walked back for real, they said, "Just 1 more. Somebody's on the way." They couldn't get anybody there. So I went out of the stage, and you see me kind of stalling, because that's exactly what I was doing. That long intro to What Is Freedom, the song, was me trying to figure out what to sing. I sang every song I knew.
Yeah, I was 22 years old. I mean, I look back at other people who were 22 years old and they look like little kids or something, and basically scared the hell out of me. On the other hand, once I got off the stage, I also knew that there was no gig that could ever frighten me, because I had just done this one. Because there was people, like I said, not just the people in the field. When we were up in that helicopter, there was people as far as the eye could see in every direction, 360 degrees. It was only a small portion of them that was actually in the field itself. And it was just sort of like a convergence of stuff that was going on.
Creedence Clearwater Revival had been among the first to sign a deal to perform, but the delays pushed their start time to 3 in the morning on Saturday the 16th.